Hello, council people of the city of Pawnee. My name is Dr. Brian, and I am here with the company Pond to Power, which is an algae-based biofuel company. Just to give you a little bit of background, I have 4 PhDs, one from Harvard, one from Yale, one from Cornell, and one from Princeton. So I'm very knowledgeable in the subject, and we are here speaking about 25 acres of land here in Matthews, North Carolina, and the 2 options we have for that land. I believe that my option is far superior to the cigarette factory that would also like the 25 acres of land, and I would love to share with you why. So before we dive into the subject of algae-based biofuels, let's get to know a little bit more about algae. So there are more than 100,000 species of algae, and they can grow basically anywhere that there's sunlight and carbon dioxide, which makes it perfect because crops like corn that are biodiesel fuels or other crops, other legumes or grains that people have been trying to use for fuel tend to require a ton of land space, a ton of water, a ton of irrigation. So they've got huge environmental impact. Algae are easy to grow and they can be manipulated to produce huge amounts of oil without disturbing any natural habitats or food sources. And algae are very easy to please. So all they need are water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide. Whereas renewable energy sources like wind or electric or solar all need some kind of, like, you need sunny weather, you need windy weather. So with algae, really, it just grows like a plant. So we can do it anywhere and in most types of weather. So another reason that algae-based biofuel is a really good alternative to normal fuel economically is that growing algae is relatively inexpensive compared to fracking for oil because it can just be grown in open ponds. So we're not requiring all these safety, red tape, huge drills, or specific locations to do it. So that definitely will bring our price down as we do more and more of this algae-based biofuel. And the other great thing that is environmentally good and economically good is that there isn't the possibility of oil spills or like seismic activity from fracking for oil that cause extremely expensive damage. I just think about the BP oil spill. With algae-based biofuel, the worst thing that could happen to us really would be too much algae growing. We have a bunch of algae we have to get out of a pond. So there's also that aspect economically that there really isn't the possibility for much damage to the environment if something were to go wrong. So now I'm going to open it up to questions for any of the council people that might be wondering a little more about algae-based biofuels.
Why is algae-based better than natural gas?
That's a wonderful question. So a lot of people wonder what makes algae so much better than, say, using natural gas or other types of geothermal. Well, first of all, during the biodiesel production process, algae consume carbon dioxide. So in other words, through photosynthesis, the algae are pulling carbon dioxide from the air and replacing it with oxygen. And as most of you know, carbon dioxide is a dangerous greenhouse gas that has a lot of environmental ramifications. And the even better thing about algae-based biofuel that's just an added benefit is, as you can see here in this poster, the algae-based biofuel location can be put near a factory and actually soak up that excess CO2 in its process. So we're not creating any extra carbon dioxide because the algae is pulling carbon dioxide out of the air, and then that same carbon dioxide is what's getting burned back off when it's fuel. So that is our biggest environmental benefit.
How about economically?
That's also a great question. So some people wonder if algae-based biofuel is going to be crazy expensive. Can real people use it, or is it just way too expensive for the average person to use in a car or a plane or a truck? And the answer is, right now, it's at about $33 a gallon for $33 a gallon for this algae-based biofuel that we've made. But we're in the very beginning stages of production. So hopefully our goal is to have it down to $1.57 by stage 2, which will be in about 2030. So the goal is that it would be as cheap or even cheaper than regular gas. We're just doing some more development and research to get it there. So do we have any more questions from the council people?
So doesn't this have a lot of waste?
Well, that's actually a great question. So I'd prefer not to call it waste. I prefer to call it leftovers because unlike coal, which produces a tons of gross toxins and kind of yucky chemicals that can get into the environment, the leftovers from pressing the algae for oil are actually really useful. So pressing algae creates leftovers that can be used as fertilizer and feedstock. So as opposed to having leftovers like with nuclear, again with coal, like I said, where you have to store them somewhere and try to make sure they don't contaminate groundwater or anything like that, algae can actually be used to create fertilizer and feedstock without depleting other food sources. And the most exciting part about that is biodiesel makers will claim that we'll be able to produce 100,000 gallons of algae oil per acre. So also in 1 acre, we've got this huge energy efficiency. So we're not having to do a ton of land disturbance or waste.
So how does algae biofuel work?
Well, that's where this chart comes in really handy. So algae can either be grown in open ponds like you see here, or it can be grown in closed containers that look fairly similar.
Hi, Ford Hiller here. Could you please tell me the specific process that you use to get this oil from the algae?
So what happens is we take this algae, and the first process that we do this through is called hexane solvent method. So basically, we're going to press the algae down, compress it, and that gets out about 95% of the oil. And then the leftover algae is going to be mixed with hexane and then filtered and cleaned, so there's no chemical left in the oil. So we're getting clean oil from this algae, and we're getting 95% of the algae is being transformed into oil. There's also just a straight pressing method called the oil press, and that's literally just, it's like pressing olives or squeezing oranges for orange juice. You're just compressing it really tightly, kind of like you see here. This is the process of pressing and refining. And through that process, which is much easier, we're still getting 75% of the oil from the algae being pressed.